Welcome to Mystery Bible. My name is Ken Primus. I am your host. We have been looking at the flood the last couple of episodes. We did two, and I am going to mention in this episode. I'm going to mention the flood from the vantage point of Enoch. Enoch actually had a front seat to this entire event, and he talked about it in the book of Enoch. I had mentioned to you in the previous podcast that he had two dreams. The first one we dealt with when he was at his grandfather's house, and he was sleeping, and he had a vision of the flood and the destruction of the earth. And when he yelled, "The earth is destroyed," and then I read to you his prayer and all of that, asking God for for a seed to be saved, and that seed was saved through Noah. And we talked about that seed war that I've been just briefly mentioning from time to time, and where it was instituted in Genesis chapter 2, when God announced to Lucifer that there would be an individual that is coming at some point in time in in the halls of history, and that person will he will restore what you had destroyed, and that person is in the person of Jesus Christ. And the book of Enoch, he talks that vision that he had, that dream that he had, actually was a timeline that goes all the way to the end of the age and the several coming age. He talks about a 12-week, and it actually chronicles the timeline with the earth and all of the different things. He goes into a lot more than that. The book of Enoch, people, is about prophecy. It's not just about Nephilims. It's about prophecy. And but we're going to go through the flood from his vantage point, and then we're going to take a peek at the lineage of Noah after that, after the land on Mount Ararat, and how they separated, and what comes in after that. But I'm very excited to get into this episode, so we'll be right back after this. Welcome to another episode of Mystery Bible. My name is Ken Primus. Let's get straight into this because there's a lot of information to cover in this particular podcast. I wanted to give you an overview. We went through the flood, but there's so much more that I want to talk to you guys about. One of the things that I want to do is to read some excerpts out of the book of Enoch. When we talk about the book of Enoch, a lot of people think that it just talks about Nephilim, which it does, but the greater part of that book deals with prophecy. It talks about, actually, it gives you an outline of what is to come, basically the entire calendar for the world, the end of the age, and to the white throne judgment. In the book of Enoch, he talks about Adam and Eve. He talks about Abraham. He talks about the Nephilim world. He talks about the flood, Abraham to Joseph. Talks about Moses. Talks about the Exodus, Moses at Mount Sinai, the 40 years in the wilderness. All of these things he talked about: Saul, David, Solomon, the prophets. I mean, the book of Enoch goes into a lot of information that if you get a chance to read it, and you'll see. So what I wanted to talk about is the second dream. I talked to you, I read to you about that first dream that he had about the flood when he was over at his grandfather's house, and he talks to Methuselah and he tells him the dream. So, but the second dream goes into a couple of things. The first part of it was about Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, but I wanted to take some things out of there so that you can see where I'm going to. Um, so let me start with 85 in the book of Enoch. It says, "After this, I saw another dream, which I will reveal now to you. My son, listen carefully to my second dream that I had before I married your mother. And I dreamed that a white bull came up out of the earth, and after it came up, a heifer, um, and along with the heifer came up a black bull and a red bull. And these are symbols of that white bull is a symbol of Adam, the heifer is Eve, the black bull is that of Cain, the red bull is Abel. And it says that the black bull grew and the heifer uh, um, uh, uh, moved it with him. And it talks about how Eve went with her son, but she was still looking for her um, for her lost son, which was Abel. And tells us that this heifer gave birth to another white bull, and that white bull was Seth. Just follow it, just bear with me for a minute. And after she bore many bulls and black cows. So it tells us that Eve had one son, and then after Seth was born, she had other children. And we could see that. And so 86 tells us that the creation of the Nephilim, then he saw Azazel fell from heaven, and it rose and ate. And he's talking about an angel coming down. In from heaven. He says it ate and pastured amongst the cow. The cow represents the women. Then I saw a large cow, uh, this Seth children, and the black cow, the Canaanite children, and they changed their stall pastures, and their young began to cry against each other. I looked towards the heaven, and behold, I saw many stars descended from heaven and bowed down to the first star, and they became bulls among those cattle, pastures among them. So these are the 200 angels coming down. This is what he saw. And then they let out their sexual organs like horses do, and mounted and impregnated the cows. And the cows bore elephants, camels, and asses. And these are the first generation of the Nephilims. All the cattle, which are the humans, fear them and began to bite with their teeth and to devour and to gore with their horns. They began to devour those cattle, and behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them, and they flee from the earth. And again, we see a picture of the Nephilims eating, partaking in cannibalism with the humans. Now, 87 tells us that the angels came, and Enoch was raptured. And so he is raptured, and the angel told him to, one of the angels took him to the heavens, and they told him, remain here until you see everything that happens to all the elephants, the camels, and asses, and the stars of and the cattle. So here is judgment. And so section 88 is what we call the Nephilim Civil War, which I talked to you about, where Michael was instituted to go and to start that war with, actually it was Gabriel, sorry. Gabriel was commanded to institute the war. And it says that Enoch says one of the four angels which is Gabriel, drew his sword and gave it to those elephants, camels, and asses. Again, this is the first generation, which I told you that they were allotted 500 years to live, and it was Gabriel's um, command. God gave him the command to go and cause a civil war. So that's a picture of the civil war that is taking place. And so now 89, he talks about the flood, and you'll see what I'm trying to do as I try to bring to you the picture of, and so we'll go into Noah's lineage after that. But 89 states, this is the flood. One of the four went to the white bull Noah and instructed him in a secret while it was terrified. He was born a bull, but became a man. A bull, a great vessel, and dwelt in it. He built a great vessel and dwelt in it. And that's the ark. Three bulls, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, dwelt with him in that vessel which covered them. I looked up to heaven and saw a high roof with seven water torrents. A great amount of water flowed through those torrents into an enclosure, and I was watching. Fountains were opened and the surface of that great enclosure, and that water began to swell and raise upon the surface, and I watched that enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. And there you go. There, Enoch is saying that the entire earth was covered with in the flood, and it wasn't just a localized flood as some try to teach. And so here we have a witness telling exactly what's going on. It says the water, darkness, and mists kept increasing. The water rose above the heights of the enclosure and steamed over the sides and poured upon the whole earth. All the cattle gathered together, but eventually they were swallowed up and perished in the water. And again, the cattle represents man. And so, but the vessel floated upon the water while all the cattle, the elephants, the camel, and the asses, along with all the animals, sank to the bottom so that I could no longer see them. They were not able to escape, but perished into the depth. Then the water torrent were removed from the high roof, and the chasm of the earth were leveled up, and other abyss were opened. Then the water began to run down into the abyss till the earth became visible. And that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. That vessel, being the ark, settled on Mount Ararat, which we know. And he tells us here that that flood came, and all the cattle, the elephants, the camel, and the asses, along with all the animals, sank at the bottom. So this was the destruction of the entire race at the time, minus those that were in the ark, Noah and his family. But we see the destruction of the Nephilims and everyone that was there, all the humans, apart from those that were in the ark. And I read that part where they were knocking on the ark, saying to him that to Noah that now they want to repent. But let's go on. But that white bull Noah, which had become a man, came out of that vessel, and the three bulls with him, and one of those three was white, Shem, like that bull Noah, and one of them was red, Japheth, as blood, and one black, Ham. And the white bull, Noah, departed from them. And so what we're going to see as we begin to study the lineage of Noah, that once they get off of the ark, that they do separate, and they go their different ways. And it tells us that in 10, that they began to bring forth beasts of the field, birds, so that there arose different species and it goes into Enoch goes into different species, meaning Gentile nations, and they refer to the Gentile nations as lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boar, foxes, squirrel, swines, falcons, vulture, kites, eagles, and raven, and among them was born a white bull. And that white bull that was born at that time was Abraham. And so I wanted to give you this reading from the book of Enoch so that you can see that Enoch had I guess he was in the heavens getting a view of what was happening through this dream that he had. He had the dream and he saw the destruction of the earth. First, he saw from Adam all the way through, and then he begins to talk about the flood. But I suggest that you guys take that book and begin to read it, because what happens is that he calls all of his family, and he told his son to Methuselah to bring all his brothers and sisters, bring the entire family together so that he can give them the full vision of what he had, to give them all the news and the information of the dream. And that dream, as I mentioned to you, goes all the way to the end of time. It tells in detail, actually, and dates when roughly when the end of time is going to be, or the end of the age of this age. And according to he talks about the 12-week prophecy, which is a timeline to the end of days, to the end of time. I think it runs somewhere where it is believed that 3075, I believe, from the studies that I've read about, that that's the ninth week. I think the end of the ninth week is 2375. The eighth week, I think, it went to 1675. Sorry, and from 1675 to 2375, which is where we're at, the ninth week currently. So as I mentioned to you before, that each age that ends, it ends in tremendous violence and destruction. And that 10th week, it tells us that the Great Tribulation comes within the ninth week, and then the 10th week is when you have judgment and so forth. But I wanted to give you a quick run over in the book of Enoch concerning the imagery that he had in the vision, and he saw as the white bull and red bull and black bull as the lineage of Noah. And then it tells us that they separated, and we are going to go into that separation, and we're going to dive into a little more into their lineage, so that we can see that out of that lineage again gave birth to the Nephilims, and they came back on the earth. But we will get to all of that in time, but we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Mystery Bible, and we continue our topic about the flood. I gave you an overview from the standpoint of Enoch, and I told you also that get your hand on a good copy of the book of Enoch, because it has a lot to do with prophecy all the way to the end of the age. As I mentioned to you, we are actually in the ninth week. And that ninth week that he had mentioned, he talked about the 10 weeks and so forth. And so in the timeline, currently we're in the ninth week, and the ninth week ends at 2375. And so we have a few more years before the end of this age, and it's roughly around that time. So 2375 is that calculation that we were talking about. So what I wanted to do was continue about our conversation about now the lineage of Noah, his sons. I read to you what Enoch said about them, calling them Shem, the white bull. We have Ham as the black bull, and Josephus as the red bull. And now, when these guys, after they came out of the ark, I mentioned to you there's a couple of things that God had changed. The diet was number one, and then he talked about the covenant with the rainbow that he had instituted as a sign to show that he will no longer do anything like that as far as flooding the earth. So wanted to go into these young men, their lineage, and because out of Ham comes, out of his lineage was where some of the giants began to come into play again. And we talked about how after it was 3 generations after the flood that man began, his age began to came all the way down to somewhere about 100 years at the birth of Abraham. So you have Noah, we have Ham, we have Shem, and Japheth. And Japheth, he as we will begin to study, I'm going to go into each and every one of these guys' lineage, and it's going to take some time, but I wanted us to make sure that we get a good understanding of their lineage, their history, their as they disperse on the planet, which nations formed out of their sons and grandsons and so forth. Shem, he is the out of the lineage of the Messiah, came out of his lineage, and you had Shem. I think he lived like 500 years after the flood. He had his son Apraphadah, and you have Selah, Eber, and Eber had 2 sons, Peleg and Jotan. Ru came out of Peleg, Seru, Terah, which were Abram, that's Abram's father, and out of that lineage, as I mentioned, you have the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And Matthew, the book of Matthew, is a really good chapter 1, gives you the lineage all the way over of Christ. But that is Shem, and the other is Ham, and Ham, his descendants, we have Cush, the Amalek, Canaan. You have all the ites from him, the Amalekites, the Havites, the Hittites, the all of these ites came out of Canaan, the descendant of Ham. And so that's where we see some of the giants that the children of Israel has to deal with in all through their pilgrimage. And then we have that of uh, Japhet. And so um, we are going to look individually at each and every one of them, because after their dispersion, then we get into the next major event in the Bible, which is the Tower of Babel, and which lineage he came out in, Nimrod. And we were going to go do a study on him as well. And his that's an excellent story, because he's a type of the Antichrist. And there's teaching that believe that he is the Antichrist and that he will be resurrected due to men trying to. We were told that they located his tomb and that they were able to extract his DNA. And the Bible tells us that as it was in the time of Noah, so shall it be. So it tells me that this is not new, that they are going to resurrect these Nephilims in the coming years. But we're going to take a peek at Japhet and his area of where he was given by his father Noah, and he was given Europe, parts of Africa, and Asia. And we are going to take a look at his lineage, because it's really fascinating when you look into these guys' lineage and see how they populated the earth. And you have books that are out there that corroborate most of these information after the flood. You have the book of Josephus, which is one of the historian that chronicles all of the history of the world, basically. You know, um, he was given part of Joseph was part of Europe, um, which basically Spain, Scandinavia, Russia, all the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all of the stands, including Mongolia, is a part of him. The Caspian Sea, along with Georgia, Armenia, Turkey. These are all the places that he was, his descendants are, and we are going to go and take a look at them and get into their part of their location of the world. Then Shem, he had the Middle East, which is the Mediterranean Sea, to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Arabia Peninsula, all of these places, United Arab, all of these, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Jordan. This is all Gaza and Israel. This belong to the lineage of Shem. And Ham, his part of was the continent of Africa, and he had that part of it. He possessed Syria, and just all over that continent, and that's his. And from these gentlemen, the world was populated as the command was given to them after they came out of the ark. And we saw that Noah separates from them. But there's some stories in there that we're going to look at, especially in the lineage of Ham, and that the Bible tells us that about his that he discovered his father's nakedness. So we're going to study what that means, because it's very important to understand that. Uh, as a Christian growing up in the church, um, I've I remember them telling us about the story of Ham, how he Noah cursed him, and all this kind of stuff. But it wasn't him; it was Canaan, and we're going to explain why. And so um, this is very important because out of his lineage, we see that quite a few of the giants um, were brought back onto the planet Earth, and we'll get to see that and study that, and it's very very exciting stuff because we really get a chance to see um, how these guys put it all together. But I wanted to just get you guys, give you an overview of um, they these three brothers, Joseph, Ham, Shem, and as the seed war develops, because again, there is on the line all of this stuff with these brothers and descendants from each other. There is still this seed war going on because the Bible tells us that, and that Enoch tells us that the 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 Nephilims, after they perished, their spirits are still here. They would be called evil spirits, and all of the demons that were along with all the animals and the creatures that they created and stuff like that. So they were here, and the book of Enoch tells us that they hated us, they hate man, they hate woman, and they hate the human race, and that they would do destruction and find bodies in order to get to do what they wanted to do. And so the seed war will arise again, and the apostate, we'll talk about that, the great falling away from God, which they did before the flood came, and then we will see that we started doing that back again, and we continue. Uh, but we'll look at all of these guys, as I mentioned, um, even from the lineage of Canaan and his sons and so forth. You have Amalek. We have all of these different groups that the children of Israel had to fight, and we'll study the rebirth of the Nephilims, because and so we're going to take stories from the Old Testament, and you're going to understand why God said to some of especially Joshua to make sure that when they get into certain towns and villages that they kill everyone, men, women, children, dogs, cows, everything. And those were villages and areas that Nephilims were their descendants were a part of. David had to fight them. David fought several of them. Abram, he had to deal with them also when when Melchizedek came after that war that they had. We're going to go into all of that. So there's a lot we're going to go into, but I wanted to go into just a bit quick, teaser, setting it up for the next couple of weeks, next couple of podcasts that we're going to do, because we're going to study each and every one of them specifically. We're going to go to all their land. We're going to talk about their lineage. Beowulf was one of the lineage in Jessup, his lineage, and he is a real character, and it wasn't fantasy or anything. That guy is real. And so Hercules, we'll talk about Hercules. Hercules married Abraham's one of Abraham's family member. So There's a lot to talk about, but we will see how in Asia, the story that they talk about, it's one of Josephus, um, uh, his descendants, Japhet's descendant, pardon me. And so we'll, trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun. And I will see you next time. Until then, I always tell you guys to we have to learn and study so that we can be effective and change this world.
Thank you for listening to Mystery Bible. Let's walk through the Bible and learn of God and His beautiful mercies and all that He has provided for us, that we may become effective for His kingdom and change this world. Check in every week for a new episode. Search for Mystery Bible on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Breaker, Outcasts, Radio Public, and many more.